Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so happy that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Kirsten Larsen. She is the author of Wood, Wire, Wings, Emma, Lillian Todd invents an airplane. Before we invite Kirsten in, I have to let you know, I'm not supposed to say anything, but I just have to let you know something. I'm working on this incredible project with our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. I can't tell you much about it, but you know Jennifer is our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, so you kind of have to figure out that what we're working on has something to do with STEM and STEAM, and it's exciting, and it's fun, and we're calling it, it's going to be called Solve It, and I can't tell you anything more than that, but just make sure that you subscribe to the Reading with Your Kids podcast, because you want to be the first to know when Solve It is available for you to listen to. I'm telling you too much. It's going to be, it's coming, stay tuned, it's coming soon. You're going to love it. I'm going to love it. I'm loving it right now. Solve It, coming soon. Joining us right now from Antelope Valley in California. It's also known as, I think it's also known as Aerospace Valley. Please welcome to the show a member of STEAM Team 2020. She's the author of Wood, Wire, Wings, Emma, Lillian Todd invents an airplane. Please welcome to the show Kirsten Larsen. Kirsten, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
I am glad you're on. I almost lost my breath. That was a big introduction I gave you. It's a lot of words.
Well, it's a long subtitle.
Yes,
so.
yes. So first, before we talk about Wood, Wire, Wings, you were telling me a little bit about that, the part of the world that you are in, and it is so intriguing. Tell us a little bit about Antelope Valley.
Yeah, so I actually live in California's high desert north of Los Angeles, and this is the area where Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier for the first time, and the space shuttles did all their flight testing and landed out here for many, many years. So this area is kind of nicknamed Aerospace Valley. Virgin Galactic has its spaceship company, Richard Branson's company, that's going to take people up to space. So there's a lot of airplane development and always has been in this area. So it's a very exciting place to be. And if you hear planes flying overhead, that's pretty typical.
That's wild. This stuff is so intriguing to me. There's an Air Force Base a couple of hours west of Boston, and I guess it's the flight path or the takeoff path, kind of planes go up and they turn over the Massachusetts Turnpike, which is a road that I take very often. And so oftentimes when I'm driving out that road, I'll see these huge Air Force cargo ships that are flying, and they're so big, and they look like they're moving in slow motion, and it just doesn't look real. And I'm always, it's very hard for me to make sure I'm paying attention to the road because I see these ships kind of just almost just hovering over the highway, and I'm like, how is that enormous thing flying? And I'm imagining being in Antelope Valley and seeing the space shuttle or one of these kind of experimental planes flying overhead would just be mind-boggling.
Well, and I think, it's funny because after a while, kids on the playgrounds at school get kind of jaded when they see like a B-2 fly overhead or some new, we have the Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, where they do all their secret projects. So you see some weird things flying, but, you get kind of used to it.
Wow, think about that, what you just said. I understand it completely. But, we're living in a time where there's a lot of people who just get used to these incredible machines flying overhead.
Exactly. And my book talks about a time when they were so completely new that it's mind-boggling to us to even think about a time when air travel wasn't just a normal thing.
And that's one of the things that is so mind-boggling is that time that we're talking about, the time when it was hard to imagine flight, isn't that long ago. It's just like a typical human being's lifetime, or a little bit longer.
Right, exactly. I mean, people really started working on this idea of getting people flying. Well, some had very forward-thinking ideas going all the way back to Leonardo da Vinci, but the late 1800s was when you really saw all these crazy patents starting to flood the patent office with all these ideas for how people thought humans would fly.
Well, why don't we learn a little bit more about Emma Lillian Todd and her airplane?
Of course. So one thing that was really interesting to me in writing this book is, a lot of us, especially as children, were taught that the Wright brothers invented the airplane, which flew in 1903, and we're sort of taught that as the end of the story. Airplane invented, check the box and move on. And that was really just the beginning of a period of time when so many people were creating ideas for how they thought airplanes could be improved and could become very practical transportation. And that was really Lillian Todd's goal. She had been, growing up, she had always been an inventive child. Her mother was very supportive and let her tear apart the clock and typewriters and try to put it back together. And she had an inventive grandfather who had a patent on a carriage wheel. So she was really somebody who needed to tinker. I say she kind of had her original maker space at her house where she was allowed to take things apart. But for her, when she saw the first airplane, she really thought this was going to be the future. And she knew that this is where she wanted to do some work, and she wanted to create what she thought would be a very practical design. Because if you remember the Wright brothers plane, the Wright brothers had to lay on their stomach and slide their hips back and forth to steer the plane. And when Lillian Todd just didn't think that was a very practical way to do it, if you were going to take, an airplane to travel like you would on the trolley, or if you were going to be using an airplane in battle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would, I can't imagine that being convenient if you were flying from Boston to California, or especially if you're in battle.
Exactly. And so for her, it was really all about practicality. And when she looked around, in about 1906 and saw a lot of the current designs, she just she felt like she could improve on the practicality aspect.
I love that Emma Lillian Todd's family allowed her to be a tinkerer, and gave her that support. I did a little tinkering myself back when I was in my late teens, early 20s with my motorcycle, and I kind of took it apart. But and it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. But it also cost me a lot of money to get someone who knew what they were doing to put it back together. So I kind of and I had to pay for it. So I kind of lost. I kind of stopped tinkering in that way.
Well, and actually, Lillian Todd's mother, when Lillian could not get the clock back together, her mother did have to bring somebody in. But fortunately, her mom, for whatever reason, she was very progressive, and she very much supported Lillian and bought her supplies and things that she needed to do her tinkering.
It's exciting, too, to learn about this story, because not only does it remind us that, innovation can come from anyone. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, what color your skin is, what culture you're from, what language you speak. We all have the power to innovate. But also it's fun to think about, and it's really fun to remind our kids that we're still tinkering and that we're still tweaking and trying to come up with a better airplane.
Well, and so I talk about that in my author's note. So I used to work for NASA myself, and one of the facilities that I worked at is here in Southern California, and their expertise is improving airplanes and creating new airplane designs. And so I say, in the author's note that inventing and reinventing the airplane is going on even today. And that's an opportunity for anybody who wants to get involved. That's the work of engineering. It's not being the first to do something, which is a tremendous achievement. But, most engineering work is improving existing designs.
That's a really important thing. And I think, especially in a competitive society where we're always trying to be first or the best, it's really important to help our kids understand that, first is fun, and if you're in a race, that's great, but improving and changing and helping ideas grow and evolve, that's also something that's super, super important.
I totally agree. And there's one more thing that I really wanted to get across in this book, which is that I wanted to normalize failure. And, when parents read this book with their children, they'll see, that this was a years-long process for Lillian Todd. She did not succeed on the first try. She failed many, many times and at every step along the way. And that's normal. That's how inventors and engineers work. They come up with a design, they test it, they figure out why it didn't work, and then they redesign it and retest it. And that too is really the work of engineering. So failure and, taking risks and failing is very normal. And I think we really do need to normalize that with kids so they don't feel so much pressure to get things right the first time.
And I really love that you said, you started that comment by saying, we need to normalize the idea of failure with our kids, but we also have to normalize that idea with parents and help parents understand that so they can share that understanding with our kids.
Exactly. It's really, that I think there's that classic quote attributed to, Edison, and I've never really fact-checked if he really said it, but, he talks about invention being 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Mm-hmm. It's really the hard work that makes any project successful. And so, especially with my own kids, I have 2 kids, I really try to applaud hard work and effort and improvement over, oh, you got an A. Mm-hmm. Oh, you were first. Yeah.
And that it is really, really important. The whole idea, cause kids are constantly being evaluated, and, there's a grade put on almost everything they do, at school and their competitions, and for a lot of kids, for a lot of families, if you don't get that top grade, if you don't win first place, then it really bums kids out. But wow, it's a lot of the folks who are out there innovating, and they get an F in their first 50 ideas, but it might be that 51st idea that is a real home run, and that makes all the difference in the world.
Exactly. And it's really about finding your passion. When you find the area where it's worth your time and it's worth it to fail over and over again. For Lillian Todd, when she saw airplanes, that connected with her, and she was willing to work and try and fail because she was so passionate about it. So, for me, it's really, I love it when I see kids finally find that area where they're so excited to be working that they don't really care as much about, succeeding or failing because they're just having so much fun doing the work.
Yeah. Hey, I got to ask you before we go any further, I don't want to forget, you mentioned that you worked with a lot of rocket scientists. And one of the expressions that we hear a lot of time is, hey, it's not rocket science. What's it like working in rocket science?
Well, so I worked with rocket scientists. So my job was in public affairs. So I was a science translator.
Okay.
I worked in public relations with the media, and my job was to talk to rocket scientists and astronauts and engineers and make sure that we could communicate all the cool work that they were doing with everyday people. And so for me, that job was perfect training for writing children's books about technical topics. But with all that said, it was a thrill of a lifetime to work with NASA's space shuttle and space station programs, to go to space shuttle launches, and work with the news media there. I mean, it's just fascinating to work alongside people who have so many cool ideas for things that could be created for the future.
Yeah. I'm just picturing two things, first, working with folks who are so knowledgeable about a subject. I mean, they're so knowledgeable that, you have to translate for them so us can understand what they're talking about. But also being there when the space shuttle launches, what was that like?
Well, so you just can't even explain it, because the media site where we work is located, well away from the space shuttle. You can see it, but you have to be far enough away for safety. Mm-hmm. But I mean, when that thing takes off, it is so loud and overpowering. It vibrates in your chest. Mm. I mean, you can feel the launch throughout your whole body. And and I've seen several, but every time it's just so emotionally overpowering to think that human beings have created something that can fly and leave our atmosphere and do research in low Earth orbit. I mean, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. I'm really curious why you chose the title Wood Wire Wings.
Well, so this title links back to her materials. So a lot of us don't realize, but the earliest airplanes were not made of metal. They were made of wood. They were covered in fabric, and her plane was held together by wire in a lot of cases to help with the flight controls. So this kind of wood wire wings sort of connects together the materials and what she was able to turn it into, so that her biggest dream could take flight.
That's kind of mind-boggling. I'm sitting here. I just came back from a flight to Chicago. I don't fly that often, but I really enjoy it. But it really does boggle my mind sometimes to think that, hey, I'm in this aluminum tube that's flying right above the ground. I can't imagine being in, a fabric-covered thing that's flying above the ground.
Well, and it was so risky in those early days, and every flight added to what people knew about the science of flying, and everybody was trying to go a little bit higher, a little bit faster, a little bit farther, in all these very incremental steps. So, it was a very exciting time. But do I want to fly in a fabric-covered wooden frame? Not really. I'll take the aluminum tube.
One of the things that's very, very clear to me is that it's really important that you've published Wood Wire Wings right now and introduced kids to Lillian Todd, because she took the Wright brothers' invention and innovated it and built on it and improved on it. And that's something that needs to happen right now. It's air travel has become so important to our society. It's really helped connect different cultures and different countries, but it's adding to, the environment, and there's putting a lot of pollution out there. And so we kind of got to fix that. What kind of innovations do you see coming around the corner?
Well, I will tell you, I have kind of an inside track. I do keep track of what NASA's doing, and my husband is actually a test pilot for NASA, so I get a lot of updates about what's going on. But there is a lot of work right now, trying to produce better fuels for airplanes that will produce less pollution. And one of the projects that my husband is working on is a new X-plane called the Quest. They are trying to create a plane that can fly at high speeds across the U.S., so kind of Concorde-like speeds, but create a lower sonic boom, so it sounds more like a little thump instead of a crack of thunder. Right now, we can't have supersonic flights across the U.S. because of the noise pollution. Mm-hmm. And so NASA and Lockheed and other groups are trying to figure out how to be able to fly faster without creating a lot of noise.
Well, I had an experience. We were whitewater rafting up in Maine, very, very remote part of Maine, and just beautiful and quiet. And all of a sudden, there was this big explosion overhead. And what happened is, at that time, there was an Air Force base in that remote part of Maine. And the fighter jets would go out, and they would just follow along the river as they were test flying. And this incredible machine flew over us, and we didn't hear a thing. It was completely silent until it passed over our heads. And at that moment, it was like that big clap of thunder. And it was just so amazing and so fast and so loud.
Well, and if you're not used to it. So, again, I live in an area where I'm used to sonic booms. but if you're not, and they can disturb wildlife. So, I think it's wonderful that we have so many people in the aerospace community who are continuing to think about these big issues and think about how we can improve air travel. And whenever I talk to kids, I say, the airplane's not done being invented. Here's an opportunity for you if this is something that you think would be of interest.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thinking about your husband being a test pilot. I love driving different cars and things like that, but I don't know. It would take an awful lot of courage, I think, to climb into an airplane that's, it's kind of brand new. There's a lot of things we want to test.
Well, and they do have a very strong safety culture. I mean, there's a lot, and it kind of is the same process that Lillian Todd used. Mm-hmm. You test models in a wind tunnel before you create, your full scale plane. So, you do things in stages. So it's not like all of a sudden, here's the airplane. We've never tested it. Any other way, go fly it. It's a step-by-step process, which is kind of what I show in the book as well.
One of the things you and I were talking about before I hit record is just the number of people that are involved in creating airplanes and air flight, and the incredible numbers of people that put together each plane and that are responsible to get every plane up in the air and down back to the ground safely. It's just a really amazing testament to teamwork and human beings learning how to work together.
Exactly. And you have people who come from all different disciplines. In Lillian Todd's day, it was a lot of home builders. She designed her airplane. She oversaw the whole process. And now, what some of these individuals did is done by huge teams of specialists. One person may be a specialist in structures and materials. Another person is a specialist in propulsion and engines. So you have somebody else is a specialist in software, the flight software. So, the numbers of people who work on these projects now is just incredible.
Yeah. And what a great reminder to our kids that, everybody can contribute. And if a kid is interested in science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, we should really encourage them because, they don't have to be at the top of the team and the captain of the team. They can contribute on a lot of different levels with whatever it is their special talent is.
Well, and that was really my experience. I mean, I had a friend's father say, "Oh, you're studying journalism in school? I think I've seen some interns at NASA, going around with cameras and taking pictures of things. Maybe there's an opportunity for you at NASA." I was an English and history major, and I was working at the university newspaper. I would never have imagined applying for a job at NASA to work in public relations. So there truly is a job for everyone. There's a job for educators. NASA has a huge education component. So really, any talent or interest that you have, you can be involved in technology and engineering in some capacity.
Yeah. What, we talked about Emma's folks, just encouraging her to be a tinkerer and being willing to put up the expense to have someone come in and fix the clock. Short of letting our kids take apart our computers and possibly needing to have somebody come in and put the computers back together. What would you say is the best way for us to encourage our kids and ignite their curiosity about science, technology, engineering, and math?
I think kids are naturally curious, so it's not even really an issue of igniting. It's more fanning the flame of whatever interests them. So, I would say expose your children to as many different types of science and technology as possible. I mean, a lot of kids are interested in space and airplanes and weather. Kids are really observant. So, for me, with my own children, it started with getting nonfiction books out of the library, and they would just go down the shelves and pull whatever interested them. And then when they find something they're interested in, just go with it. Don't try to redirect them, but try to support them as much as you can. And when they get frustrated or they have a failure, just let them know it's normal and encourage them to get back in the game.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Just one last question before we go. What's it like being a member of STEAM Team 2020?
Oh, well, it's such a joy. So that STEAM Team 2020 is a group of children's book creators who write STEMs and STEAM, because arts is in there too, books. Some of them are fiction, some of them are nonfiction. We cover the gamut of age groups and reading levels. And, as a creator, sometimes it feels a little awkward to promote your own books, but when you can talk about your friends' books and how amazing they are, that's a real joy. So for me, it's an excuse to read a lot of awesome books and to talk about them and share them with other readers who I think would love them too.
Yeah. Well, we don't want anybody to pass up any excuse to read more books, especially reading books with their kids. And I think Wood, Wire, Wings, it would be a fantastic book to co-read with our young middle grade kids, and just a great way to start some super conversations with our kids about flight, about invention, about tinkering, and instead of just listening to pop music on the way to soccer practice or dance class, talk about what we read together and talk about science and flight and talk about Lillian Todd. So I'm really, really happy that you wrote Wood, Wing, Wires and had a chance to talk about it with us today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
We've been talking to the author of Wood, Wire, Wings, Lillian Todd, and Vincent Airplane, Kirsten Larsen. Thanks so much for being part of our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Aditi Mohan Singh. She'll be back on the show to talk about her brand new book, How Our Skin Sparkles. I just love that title. Imagine if every kid were able to look at themselves, look at their skin, and just love themselves, to see that they sparkle and they have so much to give to the world. That's the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. You know, you may be an author of a great children's book. You may be frustrated right now because of the quarantine. The school visits are canceled. Book signings are canceled. Book readings in libraries are canceled. It's so difficult to let the world know how your book sparkles. Well, we may have a way to help you. We have this beautiful program called the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Program. And if our panel believes that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read. And with that status comes a number of wonderful tools that are really, really helpful and help your book stand out amongst the crowd of books that are published every single month. You can learn more about our program by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Author Services button at the top of the page, and you'll learn all about it. I want to thank the folks who made today's show very, very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Kirsten Larsen. She is a member of STEAM Team 2020. Her book is wonderful. You have to check it out. I also want to thank my incredible team. Of course, I want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my awesome author ambassador, Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for having my back here in the studio. But most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Thank you so much for connecting with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @JedleyMagic on Twitter, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram. But most of all, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking to the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.